We will move now to the next presentation, which is next submission is an oral presentation for Mr. Wood, as outlined in CMD 18H 2.27. Go ahead, sir.
Caelhan Wood for the record. I've been watching this hearing over webcast, and I was so happy to see how thorough everyone here is being in assessing the proposed license changes. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. I also noticed that most of what I was going to say has already been discussed at great length, so I don't have that much to say. I did note your efforts to reach out to youth, and as a young person, I would like to speak for those youth who are not interested in nuclear energy. I live in a small off-grid community near Barry's Bay. We supply our energy through solar panels. We grow a lot of our own food. And looking to my present and my future, I don't have an interest in employment opportunities in the nuclear sector because the land gives us what we need. In fact, I don't want any nuclear energy at all. I don't see the need for it. With the future of this land we survive from in mind, I need my tax dollars to fund programs for youth that teach us how to create and maintain renewable and sustainable sources of energy. Not programs that perpetuate any level of radioactive waste to contaminate the lifeblood of this land. I value healthy soil, water, and air for growing food and raising livestock over job creation in the nuclear sector. My community doesn't need nuclear energy. We need clean and thriving ecosystems, and I'm willing to bet that future generations will feel the same way. That being said, I'm very grateful to all of you who are working to find ways of containing the radioactive waste that has been leaching into the water for so many years. And I want to make it clear that I'm speaking from a place that urges you to look at the motives that are enabling the work at Chalk River. Is this new license really doing all it can to prevent accidents from happening? This is a situation where we have the honor of putting aside our own needs to serve the well-being of the whole. And you have already spoken about how you will hold annual regulatory oversight reports that are open to the public, but I would like to know how you will ensure meaningful public participation as outlined in the recommendations of the expert panel Building Common Ground. Meaningful participation means to have the inherent potential to influence decisions made throughout the assessment, provide inclusive and accessible opportunities for early and ongoing engagement from the public and Indigenous groups, and provide the capacity required for active participation in the engagement. So even with an opportunity to make an intervention like I'm doing now, what is the use if there isn't a possibility of having an impact? Or maybe I just need some clarification about how this intervention will turn into action. I'm unclear about that. And just in conclusion, I I know it's obvious, but I just want to remind everyone that there's a risk that 1 million cubic meters of radioactive waste could contaminate the Ottawa River, which provides drinking water for millions of humans, plants, and animals downstream. And this contamination would remain for 100,000 plus years, which is just unimaginably long. This fact alone eclipses any reason for not handling the situation with the utmost care. Please remember that we are only visiting this planet for a brief time as guests. Think about the countless other life forms that will come after us and experience the consequences of the important decisions being made now. And take a moment to consider how much power you hold over the health of so many beings. You have the honor of protecting them. And I have faith in your goodness. You're doing a lot of work to help protect us. But I am a little bit scared because as the situation stands, it appears to me that the regulator seems to be more interested in supporting the nuclear industry rather than protecting our health and the environment, which is its primary mandate under the Nuclear Safety and Control Act. So please keep our life-giving fresh water safe. Please feel the will of your heart and act upon it despite what your minds might say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any question? Question? You want to answer? You want to do it? Go ahead.
Thank you. That was an interesting, helpful presentation. You mentioned, and 2 or 3 other people have mentioned, the risks of accidents on site. So I think it might be helpful to get some sense from both CNL and from staff. Now that NRU is shut down, if you were going to put some list of potential risks that worry you from accidents on site, what would they be and what can be done to mitigate against them happening?
So maybe I'll start. David Cox for the record. So all of our nuclear facilities, Class 1 and Class 2 facilities, have safety analysis reports, which is detailed documentation on the characteristics of the facility, how it's operated, and calculates and determines the consequence of failure or upset conditions, and then puts in place and identifies the measures that are necessary in order to protect the safe operation of those facilities. The NRU reactor, which was mentioned, and I've mentioned previously, is the only facility on the Chalk River site which has a design basis accident that would produce off-site consequences. So with the shutdown of NRU, we end up with the remaining facilities and the safety analyses that supports those facilities not having an off-site consequence. Okay, so that's an important clarification to make. In terms of the facilities that give us the greatest concern, and as myself as Chief Nuclear Officer, we're taking action to address areas of risk, and we prioritize the work that we're doing. And one of the facilities which has come up for discussion a number of times in the hearing already as well, aside from NRU, is the fissile isotope storage solution tank, which we talked about yesterday, and for which there are risks that are being managed on an ongoing basis, but for which we're taking action in order to eliminate those risks over a period of time through repatriation activities. So I think that's the level of comment I think that I'd make. We have a solid safety basis. It's well understood for all the facilities. And I want to emphasize, as Mark and I said in our opening remarks, that the risk profile for the site is significantly diminished with the shutdown of NRU and through the coming license period. And that is part of the basis for our application for a 10-year period. Thank you.
Jan24 for the record. As we put throughout our presentation yesterday, we talked about the impact of the shutdown of NRU as being a fairly important change. I'll echo what Mr. Cox said in the sense of the off-site consequences. The risk for a significant off-site release is diminished to the point of it is pretty well disappearing with the shutdown of NRU. Touched a bit more on that, though, is it's perhaps worthwhile discussing the emergency management program, because that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about a severe accident and potential consequences. So I'd ask Mr. Richard Tennant, who's with our emergency management program division, to perhaps touch a bit on what happens with regards to emergency management at Chalk River once NRU has been shut down, defueled, and dewatered.
I just should go very quickly with this, because tomorrow we're going to have the Office of the Fire Marshal from Ontario, who is in charge of the new Ontario Government Emergency Planning, and I really would have liked to hear them and the Quebec side of the House on Emergency Planning in collectively. But in a quick kind of an overview of some of the emergency management. Over to you.
Richard Tennant, for the record, Emergency Management Programs Division. First, it's important to note that even to date, CNL maintains an emergency management program that meets and satisfies all CNSC's regulatory requirements on site and continues to meet requirements for off-site response. And as stated by CNL, when NRU does shut down and goes into defueling, there will be a process where under the new PNERP, which we'll be talking much more in detail about tomorrow, there will be a process where they go and communicate with the province about now assessing what the risks are and whether or not the PNERP will apply to off-site, but on-site risks that will still be covered under the regulatory document 2.10.1, and they will still be required to maintain on-site emergency programs that meet the CNSC's requirements.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, I just have a question with respect to Mr. Wood's point regarding opportunities. I think you stated what opportunities are there for ongoing public involvement in both this activity that's being licensed and discussed today, but other activities related to this site, which we know are also slated for public hearings. So perhaps maybe CNL could talk a little bit about other opportunities for public involvement in licensing and general activity reporting and information sharing.
Okay. Dave Cox, for the record. I'll ask Pat Quinn to give us a description of those communication efforts.
Good afternoon, Pat Quinn for the record. Engaging the public obviously is a very important part of being a responsible licensee in the community, and we look forward to providing opportunities for the public to engage. Over the licensing period, we had participated in a variety of external events, numbering probably approximately about 150. I'll point out that about 45 of those activities were within the last 2-year period. And so with our project activity from the Chalk River Laboratories and in the county, we've conducted more public information sessions, open houses, presentations to council, and whatnot, to promote and raise awareness of our project activities, but also to receive feedback from the public. And so we welcome that. And so listening to the discussions over the last couple of days, I know that having the public engage and have an opportunity to ask questions of us is very important. And so over the last 12 months, we've actually evolved some of our public information sessions to the point that where we would provide poster sessions where we were looking at smaller groups that would come out to see us, and they'd have the opportunity to speak one-on-one and provide comments to subject matter experts. They would do so. They were also welcome to leave comments, and we would respond back to those comments if they were questions. But then we also evolved the program that we would provide presentations so that we could take questions and have participation of the broader group as a whole. We've also, though, as part of our evolution, we're looking at, and we have used for some topics, the use of webinars so that we have a broader reach and can be a little bit more accessible. And we're always welcoming comments and input from the public.
I think the question was more about going forward. So, if the licensee is granted a license, what is the opportunity for public input along the way, whether it's an annual basis or information forms and other plans for the facility? I think, Mr. Wood?
I understand that there's a lot of opportunities to intervene or write in and give our opinions, but I just don't understand how that's converted into an action plan. Like how does it affect the work that you're doing on the site? Like I hear that we state a concern, and then there's a response that says what you're doing and why it's okay, and it just sort of seems like it's dismissed a little bit. And I'm wondering how does what we're saying translate into action, if that makes sense.
CNSC? Go ahead.
My name is Debo Lusol. I'm the Director of the Strategic Regulatory and E-Communications Division at CNSC. I do want to just underscore the point that a license condition that the licensee has to adhere to is the establishment of a public information disclosure program and the creation of a protocol. Within that requirement are the needs to have that protocol accessible to the public. And one of the requirements is that they listen to issues and items that are of interest to the public. And that includes interventions that happen at hearings and meetings. So in response to Mr. Wood's question in terms of what action can come out of this, it helps to inform the public information program that the licensee establishes. And staff has done an evaluation of that program, and we have concluded that it is meeting the regulatory requirements that's set out in RDGD 99.3.
We got to move on. So any final thoughts?
No, thank you.